Use headphones for best experience.
They escaped the butchered ship Goliath, but the thing they stole won't stop whispering. Adrift and running out of air, Elias and Mara aim for a silent outpost and step straight into something worse. Elias Vance jolted awake in the shuttle's pilot's seat with a strangled gasp. For an instant, he thought he was still aboard Goliath, the derelict mining ship turned charnel house, with blood slick on his hands and monsters shrieking in the vents. But reality set in. He was in the cramped cockpit of their escape shuttle, adrift in silent darkness. A soft alarm blinked on the console, bathing the cabin in pulsing red light. Elias wiped cold sweat from his brow and forced himself to breathe the stale air. The taste of blood on his split lip reminded him he was still alive. Focus. They had made it out. Strapped into the co-pilot's chair beside him, Mara Jensen stirred at the sound of his gasp. The young communications officer looked as haunted and exhausted as Elias felt. In the dim glow, her freckled face was gaunt, a makeshift bandage wrapped around her left forearm. Hearing Elias move, Mara blinked awake. Her eyes, glassy with lingering terror, found his. "You okay?" she asked, voice a raspy whisper. Even speaking seemed to cost her energy. Elias nodded uncertainly. "Nightmare," he managed, his own voice low and rough. More than a nightmare, he thought, but didn't say it aloud. Mara knew as well as he did that the horrors they'd seen were no mere dreams. For a moment, only the hum of the shuttle's life support broke the silence. Elias's gaze drifted to the sealed locker bolted to the floor, their grim prize from Goliath, a shard of the marker. It was a jagged black sliver inscribed with alien glyphs, the largest fragment they'd salvaged when they blew apart the marker on Goliath. Even now, it emitted a psychic whisper that could drive people mad and twist the dead into monsters. They couldn't simply jettison it. Someone else might find it, or worse. They had to find a way to destroy it for good. Mara followed his gaze to the locker and shuddered visibly. "It's quiet, at least," she murmured. Elias understood. When the marker on Goliath was whole, its influence had been palpable, phantom whispers at the edge of hearing, an oppressive sense of being watched. The shard was weaker, but even now he occasionally caught himself straining to hear a faint murmur that might not be there. He checked the console. The shuttle's autopilot was engaged, guiding them toward a remote fueling outpost designated G47V, a skeleton crew depot for deep space miners. It was likely deserted or minimally staffed, which was ideal. "Where are we heading?" Mara asked, leaning over his shoulder. "G47V, Elias answered. "It's a refueling depot, mostly automated, maybe a few staff. The shuttle must have plotted a course there on autopilot when we launched." Mara frowned. "Is it safe? What if it isn't empty?" "It should be nearly empty. In any case, we don't have a choice. We need fuel and oxygen." Mara pressed her lips together and nodded. They both understood the risk, but drifting without fuel was no option. Mara instinctively began checking the comm system. "No signals from G47V, she reported quietly as static hissed. "Maybe it really is deserted." Suddenly, a gentle tone pinged from the console. Approaching waypoint G47V, droned the shuttle's navigation system in a tinny voice. Elias straightened and activated the forward cameras. On the viewport screen, a shape loomed out of the star-specked darkness, the refueling station. The station was a small, spindly outpost built into a rocky asteroid, a cluster of fuel tanks and docking clamps around a tiny central hub. Only a few lights flickered and no other ships were docked. "Looks deserted," Elias muttered. He hailed the station on comms, but no response came, only static. He guided the shuttle into position and locked onto the station's docking port. The clamps engaged with a dull clunk, sealing them to G47V's airlock. Elias stood on unsteady legs. "Get your helmet on," he told Mara, "just in case. The station should have atmosphere." But after what they'd been through, he wasn't taking chances. They quickly pulled on their lightweight vacuum suits and sealed their helmets. Elias also retrieved the plasma cutter he'd salvaged from Goliath's engineering deck. The heavy tool, repurposed as a weapon, had saved them more than once back on that ship. He checked its energy cell and strapped it to his belt. Mara picked up a compact pulse pistol, the only firearm they had left. Heart thumping, Elias thumbed the hatch release. With a hiss, the shuttle's hatch opened to reveal the docking gantry. Beyond it was an airlock door marked G47V. The airlock controls were unpowered. A thin film of dust coated the panel, which Elias wiped away. No lights inside, he muttered, peering through the small circular window. Darkness. Mara swallowed audibly over the helmet comm. The station could be completely shut down or abandoned. Elias manually cranked the outer airlock door open, the mechanism squealing in protest. Stale, cold air wafted out, carrying the scent of metal and something else, something faintly organic and sour. Mara's eyes widened. She smelled it too. They stepped inside the tiny airlock chamber and sealed the outer door behind them. Elias engaged his suit's flashlight, a cone of stark white cutting into the dark. The inner airlock door needed power to open normally. Spotting a manual override lever, Elias pulled it with a grunt of effort. The door slid open halfway with a screech, stuck on its tracks, enough to squeeze through. Elias went first, ducking under the half-open door into the station's main corridor. Mara followed close, her pistol raised and trembling slightly in her grip. They enabled their magnetic boots to stay grounded. It was quiet. The only sound was the crunch of their boots on the deck grating and the muffled rasp of their breathing in their helmets. Elias swept his flashlight slowly across the corridor. The passage was narrow, with pipes along the ceiling and a few access panels on the walls. Emergency glow strips provided faint orange illumination at floor level, just enough to see the outline of the hall. They advanced, tense. Past an open equipment locker was an intersection. A sign on the wall pointed left to storage and life support, and right to control room. Forward was docking B. "Which way?" Mara whispered over comms, eyes darting. "Control room," Elias answered. If anyone was here, they might be there. And if not, they could at least try to restore some power or access station systems. They moved right, down a short corridor, ending in a closed hatch labeled Control. This door, too, was unpowered. Elias gripped the release wheel and heaved. It resisted stubbornly before finally turning with a metallic groan. The hatch popped open, and Elias pushed into the control room. Floating papers and debris greeted them. Elias's flashlight danced over a console bank, a couple of swivel chairs bolted to the floor. One had broken loose and drifted to the ceiling. And, his heart skipped, a human figure. A man in a technician's uniform floated limply near the console, held in place by a tangle of cables around one ankle. Mara sucked in a breath as they saw the gaping wound across the man's throat, and the constellation of blood droplets suspended around him like dark red pearls. Elias instinctively threw out an arm, blocking Mara from moving in. Her voice cracked with alarm. "Is he?" "Dead," Elias confirmed grimly. The tech looked to have been in his 50s, with graying hair now matted with dried blood. His eyes were mercifully closed. "What happened here?" "Suicide." The slash was vicious and jagged, more like an attack. Mara stepped forward, boots clanking, until Elias shot her a warning look. They both knew the real fear. If the marker's shard, safe on their shuttle, somehow influenced this place, any dead bodies could reanimate into horrors. "We should destroy the brain, or remove limbs," Mara whispered, recalling the only way they'd permanently killed the creatures on Goliath. The thought of mutilating this corpse made Elias sick, but better to defile a corpse than face it rising to kill them. They'd learned that lesson too well. He hesitated, jaw clenched. The man's body remained still, eerily peaceful despite the gruesome wound. Gathering his resolve, Elias edged closer, steadying himself on the console. "Cover me," he murmured. Mara aimed her pistol with trembling hands while he drew a folding knife from his belt. His stomach churned as he gently nudged the body. It rotated slowly, revealing bloodied hands, one still clutching a utility knife. It looked like the man had cut his own throat. Elias grimaced and drove his knife firmly into the base of the dead man's skull, ensuring he would not rise again. The corpse shuddered and fell limp, blood oozing in slow droplets. As revolting as it was better than allowing the corpse to rise as another abomination. Elias spotted a word scrawled in dried blood on a wall behind the console. "Sorry." A chill ran through him at the dead man's final message. Elias checked the console, trying to focus. "We need to get fuel and get out, fast." He flipped some switches, hoping the station still had backup power. A few screens flickered weakly. The fuel pumps could be activated from here, routing fuel to their docked shuttle. The readouts showed ample fuel reserves in the station tanks. Clearly, G47V hadn't had many visitors lately. As he initiated the fueling sequence remotely, a tremor ran through the station's structure. A distant clang echoed. Mara's head snapped up. "What was that?" Elias didn't answer. It could have been old pipes or machinery, but his gut said otherwise. The silence felt heavier now. "Mara, go double-check the docking umbilical. Make sure our shuttle's secure." "I'll try to get the lights on," Elias said. He wanted Mara near the exit to ensure nothing tampered with their only way out. She hesitated, not wanting to leave him alone, but she nodded and stepped away, heading back toward the dock. Elias watched her disappear around the corner, then turned back to the console. He found the station's power management and diverted some reserve power to lighting. The overhead lights in the control room flickered to life, dim and unsteady, but better than darkness. Through the half-open hatch, the corridor beyond was now illuminated in fitful white light. Elias checked a monitor showing the fuel transfer, 30% and climbing. Just a few more minutes and they could leave this graveyard. As he glanced over the console for anything else useful, a low hiss crackled through his helmet comm. "Mara, did you say something?" he asked. The hiss came again. No, it was more like a whisper, just at the edge of hearing. His blood ran cold as familiar dread crept up his spine. Elias. It was not Mara's voice. It was faint, sexless, almost a sigh carried on a breeze. Impossible, a hallucination. "This isn't real," he snarled to himself, shaking his head. The marker's tricks. He looked at the corpse floating nearby and imagined that man hearing whispers in these dark halls, driven to slit his own throat. Suddenly, Mara's voice crackled through, high-pitched and urgent. "Elias, something's moving out here." Elias's heart lurched. He rushed to the hatch and ducked back into the corridor. The lights sputtered, creating a strobe of shadow and light. "Where are you?" he hissed. "By the storage room, down the left corridor," Mara replied, voice tense. Elias sprinted left toward storage and life support as fast as the mag boots allowed. The flickering lights revealed dark streaks on the wall, blood smeared by a hand. Tools floated in midair. And there, to the left, he spotted Mara halfway down the corridor. Her back was to him, flashlight trained on a doorway labeled storage. She stood utterly still. He was about to call out when he saw it. A figure in the storage doorway, partially illuminated by Mara's trembling light. It was another station crew member, only it couldn't be called human any longer. The thing was twitching, shoulders jerking with unnatural speed. The face that slowly craned toward Mara's light was slack-jawed and gaunt, eyes milky white. The body's chest gaped open in a massive wound, ribs splayed outward. From that ruin protruded something like an arm, but not an arm. A length of sharpened bone, slick with gore. Elias recognized it immediately, a necrotized creature, like those from Goliath. This corpse had turned. Mara's voice came soft and quavering. "It's one of them." She stood frozen, gun raised but shaking. The creature let out a wet, gargling hiss and launched itself from the doorway, propelling forward in zero gravity. Its bladed limbs slashed wildly as it hurtled toward Mara. "Down!" Elias shouted. Mara snapped out of her trance and threw herself aside just as the creature sailed past, narrowly missing her. Its momentum carried it into the corridor wall with a clang, spidery limbs scrabbling to reorient. Elias took aim with the plasma cutter and fired a trio of blue-white bolts. The first bolt missed, scorching the wall, but the next two hit the thing's left arm, severing it at the elbow in a burst of blackened fluid. The creature emitted a shrill, inhuman screech, more annoyed than pained. It twisted in midair and, using its remaining limb, launched itself toward Elias with alarming speed. He fired again, aiming for the legs. One shot clipped a knee, slowing it only a fraction. In a blink, the necrotic horror was upon him, slashing. Elias threw up an arm reflexively. The creature's bone blade glanced off his suit's forearm, ripping a shallow gash in the fabric and knocking him off balance. His boots lost their magnetic grip, and he tumbled weightlessly. The monster lunged, jaws snapping inches from Elias's faceplate, then a flash of light and a sharp crack from the side, Mara's pistol. The shot caught the monster in the neck, blasting away a chunk of flesh. The creature reeled, and Elias used the moment to yank a metal pipe free from the wall. With a grunt, he swung the impromptu club. The pipe connected with the creature's torso, the impact dull in 0G but enough to shove it back. "Aim for the limbs!" Elias shouted. They both opened fire as the monstrosity writhed in midair. Plasma bolts and bullets tore into its emaciated form. One of Mara's shots shattered the thing's kneecap. Elias's cutter sheared off its remaining arm at the shoulder. The creature's body, now limbless, spun aimlessly, screeching and snapping its teeth. Elias lined up one final cutter shot and fired into its skull. The thing's head exploded in a spray of dark ichor and bone. At last, the remains fell limp, drifting. Mara was breathing hard, pistol still trained on the corpse. "Is it dead?" she panted. Elias floated closer and prodded the remains with the pipe. No response, no regeneration. He sagged in relief. "Yeah, it's dead." As dead as such an abomination could be. Mara finally lowered her weapon. In the stark light, Elias saw tears brimming in her eyes. "This place too," she whispered, voice breaking. "It's happening here too." The terror and despair in her tone cut through Elias more than any blade. He reached out and rested a hand on her shoulder, unable to find any words. "We have to go," Mara said after a moment, steeling herself. "Is the fuel?" "Mostly done," Elias confirmed, eyeing the console display down the hall. "Another minute. Grab anything useful you see and get ready to run." Elias ducked into the storage room and snatched up a medkit and 2 oxygen canisters, trying not to look at the additional corpses drifting inside. He shut the hatch behind him, as if that could lock the nightmare away. "Let's move," he said, and together they hurried, half running, half jumping with their mag boots, back toward the docking port. Each step felt agonizingly slow in the low gravity, but soon the welcoming sight of their shuttle's hatch came into view. The shuttle was still docked. The fuel transfer hose attached to its side now blinked green, indicating a complete fill. Elias detached the hose and slapped the panel to retract it. They climbed into the shuttle and sealed the hatch behind them. Only after pressurizing did they finally remove their helmets, gulping the fresher air of their small sanctuary. Elias rushed to the cockpit to start launch procedures. Mara slumped into the co-pilot's seat, cradling her face in her hands for a moment. As Elias powered the engines, he glimpsed Mara's reflection in the cockpit display. Strands of her auburn hair were stuck to her sweat-damp face, and her single open eye stared unfocused at the floor. She looked utterly spent, teetering on the edge. "Hold it together, just a little longer," Elias urged silently, not only to her, but to himself. With a clunk, the docking clamps released. The shuttle backed away from the station. "We're off." Elias said, unable to suppress the tremor in his voice. Through the viewport, the lonely refueling station drifted away, its lights flickering. In his mind's eye, he saw the dead technician's face one last time. "We brought it with us," Mara said suddenly, tone hollow. "The evil. We're carrying it wherever we go." She turned to Elias, eyes haunted. "What if we can't escape it? How many will die because of this thing?" Elias tightened his grip on the controls. "We'll figure it out. We'll find a way to stop it, once and for all." He tried to sound confident, but doubt gnawed at him. All they had done so far was survive and run. Mara gave a tired, humorless laugh that hitched into a sob. Elias reached over and squeezed her shoulder, a gesture of solidarity. "I know," he said quietly. "But we'll get through this, Mara. We have to." If you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to like, comment, or share this video with your friends. Subscribe to our channel to hear more stories like this one.